I just pressed record, Allison. Hi.
Hi, David. I'm glad you just pressed record.
I I feel like we just did this. Doesn't it feel like I felt like this last week was short. It seemed like.
Not on my end, mate.
No? What's
No.
going on?
The kind of stuff that happens when you're raising your vibration and stepping into a lot of new higher existence. So, a lot of tech wonkiness, a lot. I've also been noticing too, um, a lot of people in a malaise, like in a fog, like I'm communicating with to coordinate as I'm about to leave for the retreats, people I'm not usually coordinating with,
Uh-huh.
where they're misreading the emails or they're missing something. And then there's like just tech wonkiness. Like when I have been on calls before and I'm getting ready to do a clearing and activation, Zooms or phone, um, there's it's better nowadays, but there is like this dropping off. I would get like dropped off the Zoom or dropped off the call as I was going into a higher, more spacious um, series of frequencies or vibrations, and the consciousness was bigger than the tech could hold. So I found like
Interesting.
what it is, and I find like, and it's consistent too. I find like when my clients and come back from the masterminders come back from retreat with me,
Uh-huh.
they've gone through so much up leveling with all the light they get from all of the attunements and the stuff we do at the sacred sites that they have had like water heaters break, computers break, like just there's
That's
this.
not really a selling point. It's like
I know,
up level yourself and all of your stuff will just stop working.
but but we're electric and magnetic. That's what the chi is, right? So it
Uh-huh.
affects electronics and the magnetism, and so people don't typically make that connection from.
Mhm.
It seems like consciousness is consciousness. It's not the material, physical realm, right? So that connection, I think, is a lot of the times missing for people.
Mm.
So yeah, I've been really fielding a lot of it feels like I've been like rock climbing and like clawing in a way as I come out of um old. Like this is a big up leveling that's happening now. And yeah, how does it get any better than this? What else is possible?
Yeah. You just actually you made me think about because there's another side to this, right?
Always.
In because I was thinking back to years ago, living here in the Northeast, there was this time when we were all dealing with, it seemed like we all, like everyone around me, like the age of the houses was such that there were these ice dam things, an ice dam, like that forms on the edge of the roof that basically, and it's because of temperatures going up and down, like freezing and then melting and freezing and then melting again, and there's all this snow backed up. Essentially, it makes your roof leak, bottom line. If you have an older roof, essentially makes your roof leak. And I
Oh, I
remember
remember this.
yeah, I ended up going over and staying in dad's house because of all the, I mean, this is when the girls were really little. And there was literally, I walked into Elena's room and there was water just coming through her ceiling fan. And so, like, and her room was the
Why?
first one to start flooding. And I'm just, and this was like a series of things that were happening that
Yeah.
were just so stressful. And it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't, it didn't feel at the time that it was because I was expanding and like changing frequency. I
Shit.
mean, it just felt like, it just felt like, because at that time in in my life, I mean, I did feel like there was just I was like in the consciousness of everything is happening to me,
Yeah.
right?
Instead of for me.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's interesting when you start to make that shift or, in any given moment, because I'm a human being like you're a human being living on the planet. I'm not always like walking on a cloud, right?
You're
So
not? Magic
no,
carpet ride?
not at all. That's a whole nother conversation about the extent to which like a spiritual life is like walking on a cloud because it's so not.
Well, I mean,
But
I would love to have this conversation because I've been having it for a long time, decades. Bliss is in all of my stuff, in my email address,
right,
and
right.
yeah, and I write about this in my last chapter in my second book, Turiya, the Sanskrit term for bliss and ecstasy. And so it's like this whole thing about in the UK, they use the term positive toxicity. Here, there's a term, what is it? Something positivity. I don't even know what the equivalent is in America, but like there's
Oh, it's like they mean like the Pollyanna?
kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, but Deb used a specific term recently with me about this, and I was talking with her about this, and it's a meaty topic because I feel like in the West, we don't have an understanding of the levels of consciousness and the acceptance of there is actually a place that you can get to that feels like it's bliss all the time. Our Western conditioning makes us dismiss it, right? And at the same time, one of the key aspects is, and this is going to sound a little bit racy and disruptive and controversial. Imagine that from me. Right? These guys in the ashrams were in the ashrams. We're doing the same work they did in the ashrams in the physical world. And that's one of the key aspects of the 2012 to 2032, our spiritual awakening. Boots on the ground, spirituality, infusing the physical as that's the quantum physics law, right? But how do we do this awakening and expanding whilst dealing with Zoom issues, error pages with default passwords, resetting passwords, a circular
Mhm.
tech loop, people like so overwhelmed, they're not reading emails accurately or appropriately. And so they don't even know what you've just said. So you have to repeat, like just the mayhem on
Yeah.
planet Earth right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
like, because
Yeah.
we're all up leveling. So that's
Mhm.
more. So my individual example, then taken out to humanity that I came on starting to talk about today, right? So we're in the chaos of change.
Yeah. I I am so in love with what's happening right now because I just love it when things just happen at the same time. And it happens so often now. What you're talking about is just
Synchronicity.
exactly what I was exploring so recently in the sense that and actually no, I was listening to another podcast and it was just reminding me about how when Paramahansa Yogananda came over to the United States in 1920, he remember the other just yesterday, I showed you a video of my meditation room, and you were talking about the chairs, right? You know, people meditating in chair. Yogananda, he came to the West. Everyone where he's from in India sat on the floor, right? But he came to America in 1920. He came to Boston, right? Americans are sitting in chairs. So he teaches everyone to meditate in chairs, right? And he is doing, this is what they were talking about in the podcast where he did marketing. He had like posters. He had advertisements in
I've seen old
newspapers.
pictures of
Right.
them.
You're right,
Yeah.
right. To like bring people to his lectures. If you compare that to his guru in India and his whole line and the way it's done in India, they were saying that's not done at all. So his mission in bringing yoga to the West and uniting East and West was so the approach that you're talking about as far as boots on the ground, because the ashrams, the separating yourself in order
Spiritual life
yeah, that had to happen, you know,
separate from
by
material.
yourself, separate, right? And so I just love that you went there, and I literally was, I mean, this was like the chapter I was listening to yesterday. I mean, so
Flow, living in the flow, which is an example of what I was just talking about, right? So
Mhm.
we see these synchronistic moments. We see how it lines up, which is a symptom of an expanded consciousness and upgraded vibration, right? So you're on your spiritual path, you're letting go of old storylines, you're purifying your consciousness more. And so here we are having more flow moments or more synchronicities, which is a result of that, as well as new awarenesses that help us see the unity and interconnectedness of it all because our consciousness is expanded enough to be able to see and perceive that. And at the same time, we're sitting here dealing with feeding our families.
Yeah, yeah.
So so I've like been like this idea of I remember hearing positive toxicity when I was in the UK for the first time last time I was there for the last round of
Yeah, what do
retreat,
you said that earlier. What do you mean? What are you taking that meaning to be? Like, what are you referring to?
that it's wrong and there's something bad if you're positive all the time.
Oh, I was just talking about this too.
And it's the exact goal of yoga, but because we have the Western mindset we misinterpret that as that's not possible. And I also think it's one of the thresholds we're reaching right now in this 2012 to 2032 year window of the polarity, living with polarity. The yin yang is what my hands are doing,
Uh-huh.
right? Living with the polarity, like I I have been calling this whole brain consciousness. I moved beyond like in 2014-ish, left brain, right brain, balancing the hemispheres into what I came to understand was required for our new times, a whole brain consciousness. So that it was logical magic, left and right worked together in
Yeah.
a coordinated way, right? So instead of the polarity. And one of the
East and
things that,
West. Can
and the
you?
duality, right? And being able to rise above that two separate into one unity. And so watching all of this collapse, like I know that I have been pounding out too, one of the core teachings of the spiritual, it's mislabeled, right? So anything that happens in the invisible realms, the metaphysical, beyond the physical,
Right.
is about consciousness or and it could be the mystical realms if you've done enough work to get to that mystical existence where there's more flow and synchronicities and you're able to use your tools to be able to say, you know what, right now, this is not great what's happening. And I'm going to let myself feel that frustration and that be okay. There's like these extremes. And I remember working with you on this. There's like these extreme way back years ago. There's like these definitions we have of on the spiritual path of this like 100% perfection of if I am spiritual, then I will never get frustrated. And that's
Right.
crap, but if you can, because part of what we're meant to be doing, and this might be what Debbie was talking about with, and they might mean by positive toxicity, you're supposed to feel bad sometimes. Now, I feel like I could go into a whole other thing about the difference between thoughts and being in a position where you can observe. I could possibly react with frustration here, or I could possibly choose to just not be frustrated here. So, what just happened today for me is all week long, I've been in the space of, okay, 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 one blip after another, one blip after another, okay. And I am creating a lot of new in my life, like brand new. So I'm carving out like new territory. And so that's the machete in the path in the jungle that hasn't yet been applied to the trees and the weeds and the plants.
Uh-huh.
Vast growth, right?
Right.
And so by today, when the same thing that happened yesterday with one of the technological aspects happened again, I was like, okay, I'm going to let myself feel the frustration. But that's still like living on a level of like, Daniel reflects this back to me a lot, like the choosing. He said, I like how you said I could choose to perceive what you're saying as X, which would have been a negative perception.
Right.
And I need you to help me clarify because Y is how I could also perceive it. I could choose to perceive it, which you probably deal with in your marriage all the time. Not to say that I'm married to Daniel, but business wise, it kind of feels like that in a way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Going
I
on, so much to talk about with this.
well, yeah, but I can relate to what you're referring to as far as, I mean, there's I mean, so one of the words is detachment, right? Where you can actually, so to,
Good.
when I make a choice to say, I'm going to let myself be frustrated. I'm going to let myself feel this frustration right here. There's just such a subtle but huge difference between how you experience that frustration
Totally.
when you're aware that you're allowing yourself to experience the frustration as opposed to just being completely owned by it,
So,
which,
yep.
and
Well
then you're just
said.
nothing but reactive, right?
Well, we were
And
talking about
then,
reaction versus response, aren't we?
well, yeah, I mean, but I can remember this like, I think I might have shared with you when we were on vacation in Maine, and there was like, I mean, so the girls are like 20 and 17, and there's the four of us in a small, relatively small space. And but just like, I just had this, as I'm watching us, watching myself, watching us all, just this idea, just we're just four personalities bouncing off each other. And it's such a incredible experience to be with a small group, like a small family like that. And then to see the difference between that and like how you let your personality express in those circumstances versus how you might allow your personality to express when you're in a room full of colleagues versus like your whole extended family versus it's just, I mean, it's this,
Interesting.
it's oversimplifying it to like just refer to the observer that we cultivate in meditation, because I know that we talked about this a little bit last time about how you can kind of like stop there, like think that that's like that's without, it seemed to me that without devotion, without that falling in to me, and into my heart and then expanding from there, that the observer, that's kind of like where you get to, right? Where you can actually just kind of watch yourself experience life. But there's so much more, is where I'm going. There's so much more. One other thing, while I'm on the family, I was so, uh, I guess I was impressed. I was impressed with,
Surprised.
well, no, I'm often impressed by Charlotte, but what she did was she took an assignment, like some teaching. This is actually, talk about controversial. This is actually about AI, right? She goes, her teacher asked her to write something, some sort of response about, or some sort of opinion or assessment of a teacher who used, or a professional maybe who used AI to accomplish like this certain thing.
Fun.
And where Charlotte went with it was, she said, not so much about whether or not with the AI, should she or shouldn't she, etc., but what brought her to the point of feeling like she didn't have enough time in her day, enough
Yeah.
space in her life to accomplish that thing without AI. And she talked about this whole thing about society and the pressure on kids and the amount of time that we have. And so she just, and, and anyway, I won't belabor, but I was like, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I'm with
And
you.
then, yeah. And then I cued her to say, you know what, Charlotte, just do me a favor. It's like when you have a spare moment, go and just Google what adrenal burnout is.
Excellent.
Because that's something that Auntie's talked about before. And
And
uh,
nervous system. Let's bring this in because this is very trendy right now. Parasympathetic nervous system
uh,
versus sympathetic nervous system, and how people are living from there. There's a buzzword out there right now with toning your central nervous system.
mm,
Uh, I'm saying toning, but everybody's talking about calming.
yeah.
So, like, there's an adaptogenic that Dragon Herbs does that I love, and it's bi-directional. So
Uh,
that if you're too hyped, it calms your central nervous system, brings in the parasympathetic, and if you're too low, it activates sympathetic.
yeah, we don't actually in this day and age talk about that low nearly as much as we talk about that high, because there's so much talk about, anxiety like bringing down, but that,
What we opened the conversation with, what I came on with.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, it kind of comes full circle about that whole living a spiritual life is kind of like bouncing on a cloud sort of thing. Well, that is, you could draw a line from that bit of the conversation to what low energy is, like just like sitting around and just not bringing energy to life to get things done and do things you want. So the idea of, well, it's that beautiful word equanimity, right? Where you never get too high, you never get Too low?
No, I
Mhm.
beg to differ here too. I
Go
love
for it. Beg to
but
differ.
I remember when I was in my first year of living in Taiwan, I was talking to a buddy of mine. I came from a Buddhist Taoist temple because they typically combine there. So
Uh-huh.
then, unless you go to a monastery, which is pure Buddhism, the temples there themselves, where they burn the big incense and blah, 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 is both Taoist, which is the philosophy of the traditional Chinese, and then Buddhist. And so I came back from a temple. I had gone into a little fortune machine and got out this tiny little scroll that when you opened it had a shit ton of writing on it that I had no
Mhm.
idea how to read. So I brought it to my Taiwanese friend who owned a bar in the part where, because we were there for our first year, all us expats were drinking like we were Navy sailors on break
Mhm.
on the weekends. So I went to him and he looks at this whole scroll
Uh-huh.
and then he says to me, take the middle path. And I'm like, that's all you have to say from this big long scroll. And so one of the things that from there we talked about was I said, I am at this point, I don't know, I've been meditating for about a decade, more, maybe a little bit more than that. And I said to him, I am aware that I have hesitancy with going deeper into my meditation practice because I love getting high on life. I love getting passionate. I love that juiciness. And I don't want to be brought into such an equanimity that I won't feel that passion anymore to such a height. He goes, well, Allison, then you won't have the lows go so low. And I said, I get that. And I don't really go that low. Um, and so I've been working, and so he had no answer. And so I've been working with that ever since. And he was right. It does, my passion's more my passion gets there, my fire, right? Like I get like, woohoo. And in my teen years, it was more like at times intensity, but that's fire, that's passion. I'm a double pitta for God's sakes, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I know that I had my own questions about like, is meditation going to bring me to that equanimous state where I'm feeling less because I don't want that. And it was a crucial point on my meditation path. So equanimity, I feel like can be applied with, I think of it more like in a conflictual kind of environment. I don't, and when we hear, I use balance for like balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine, between doing and receiving, you know,
Mhm.
but equanimity, I feel like another word for that may be peace, peaceful observer, right? Which is
Okay.
great, but I still want to feel passion
Well,
and I still
makes a
meditate
lot of sense, but I mean, and what?
and I still meditate.
Yeah, no, well, peace is one of the it's one of the divine aspects of God, right? It's one of the eight that the ancient yogis defined, and it is to some extent like this. I was just because I just started doing meditations on my Sunday mornings. I just started not a chapter but a series of these. Like this is going to take us through the fall. We're just going to do meditations on each of these eight because I've always wanted to do this. And I actually started with peace. And what I was talking about was how peace is. It's like as a contrast, not to go into it now, but as a contrast to calmness, peace is an absence of like an absence of turmoil, an absence of the stuff that bothers you, the absence of fear. Peace is just, it just is. And I so much enjoyed when I learned that peace, that deep inner peace, that peaceful feeling it's really the first way that God reaches out to us. It's the first thing we feel of all of them is just that peace. But what I wanted to say or in response to what you were saying a moment ago about like that passion and how experience life, I do think that there's space for
Oh, thank
to experience yourself as yourself and the difference in personalities and different people that you can we're all here for a certain amount of time, in this life, and we all came in as we did, and you and I are not the same. We're in the same family, we have the same parents, but we're not the same. And so the idea that we have to say that, equanimity is this or that, or passion or I mean, we're gonna experience this life differently. But what we're all looking for is to I put this up. This is like a little plug that I put in my when I did that spiritual recalibration series.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
that one of the things I said in that introduction is that we are I don't remember what I said now. I was trying to quote myself when I couldn't, but
You're a
it's
different
essentially
consciousness now.
it's
Interesting.
essentially it's essentially that we're all looking for a path to happiness, and living a spiritually awakened life is that path. And so on that path, we're allowed to experience stuff, and we're allowed to experience it differently. Yeah.
That's a great response to like all the way back to the beginning of the conversation because I feel like I'm hearing myself talk about acceptance for how you feel instead of needing to make it a different feeling
Yeah.
because you've concluded
Yeah.
the feeling you're feeling is bad and it means you're not as spiritually advanced as you thought you were after buying all these programs, reading all these books, doing all of these retreats.
Right on. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can relate to that so completely, as far as just needing to label something as spiritual or non-spiritual. And this does
Totally.
circle right back to the beginning, as far as boots on the ground, living, married, not married, kids, no kids, suburbs, city, where you, this is labeling things like when I sit down to do my spiritual practice, that's spiritual. And when I write my email to my colleague about the spreadsheet, that's not spiritual. That whole thing, you can
You even
totally
got nasally talking about the spreadsheet with
did
the
you hear
email. Yeah,
it? But
it
that,
got
that
heady.
but that doesn't mean that it's that those things are, I mean, that's just our ego minds just labeling things as one or the other.
Yeah, which, increasing self-mastery is understanding that the ego mind's job is to label reality to help us navigate it
Yeah.
without even that being bad or wrong.
Yeah.
Just a function of the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of I feel like pain that could be avoided. The less people had these unrealistic expectations of what they'll look like once they're truly spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that for sure. It's
Yeah.
like just now, just like this for can I fully and completely without reservation embrace this version of me right now as the fullest expression of who I am to whatever
That's
extent that
beautiful.
is me.
That's beautiful. I love what you just said.
Oh, well, that's
Is that
I'm glad.
involves self-acceptance, replacing self-judgment.
Right, all that. Yeah.
Because it's easier to have the spiritual platitudes out there, right? But then when it comes to somebody's own life, like that thing about self-valuing is such a trigger on the recent gig I did, series of live events, just feeling into the people on the live event. And when I said that, and it's happened repeatedly when I've used this self-valuing phrasing, it just triggers something like, what? I can value myself?
I wrote down. I wrote. I'm gonna let you go here. I get a scoop, but
Yeah.
I wrote. I I've written numerous times in my journal, or whenever I write, or just have this thought. I wonder what it's going to be like when I ease up on myself. I mean, like years ago, I was just on that. Like, what if you just
Beautiful.
let yourself be, just leave yourself alone a little bit, just, I don't know.
Yeah, I remember saying to you, in fact, David, you know how good you are at being compassionate for others? How about applying that to yourself?
I do remember that. Yeah, that was
I
wonderful.
do too.
That was wonderful. Big, that
And
was
you're
one
not
of the big,
alone
that
in
was a
that.
big sister moment.
Yeah, little brother. All right. So on that note, we'll talk soon.
Okay, I love you.
I love you too.
Okay, bye.
Namaste.